A Facebook post at 3 a.m. 11 words that would expose the most twisted mother-daughter relationship in criminal history. Who would write this about a murdered woman? Her killer? A stranger? Her own daughter? But here's what the police didn't know as they raced to 1247 North Volunteer Way. The young woman who posted those words? She couldn't even read properly. She was confined to a wheelchair, mentally disabled. At least, that's what everyone believed. What they discovered would challenge everything you think you know about victims and perpetrators, about love and control, about how far a mother's obsession can go, and what happens when that obsession finally breaks. Let me ask you something. When you see a mother pushing her sick child in a wheelchair, what do you think? You probably think about sacrifice, dedication, unconditional love. That's exactly what the people of Springfield, Missouri thought when they saw Claudine D.D. Blanchard with her daughter, Gypsy Rose. The community rallied around them. Free trips to Disney World, a Habitat for Humanity house, thousands of dollars in donations. But what if I told you that this little girl wasn't sick at all? What if I told you that everything you're seeing is an elaborate performance, orchestrated by the person who's supposed to protect her most? Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born on July 27, 1991, in Golden Meadow, Louisiana. Her parents, Dee Dee and Rod Blanchard, separated before her birth. For the first few years, Gypsy was developing normally, walking, talking, being a regular kid. Then something changed. When Gypsy was around 7 or 8 years old, Dee Dee began taking her to doctors. Lots of doctors. The complaints started small, sleep apnea, maybe some vision problems, but they escalated quickly. Gypsy's mother convinced her that she was gravely ill, and as a result, Gypsy spent much of her life enduring unnecessary medical treatment. She had to keep her head shaved, was confined to a wheelchair, and was even fed through a tube at times. Picture this. You're 8 years old. Your mother tells you you're dying. She shaves your head, puts you in a wheelchair, tells everyone you have leukemia, muscular dystrophy, epilepsy. You have surgery after surgery, feeding tubes, medications that make you sick. But here's the question that haunts this case. Did Gypsy know? Did she understand what was happening to her? Let's talk about performances. We all put on acts sometimes, right? We smile when we're sad. We say we're fine when we're not. But what happens when your entire life becomes a performance and you're not even the director? After Hurricane Katrina in 2005, Dee Dee and Gypsy moved to Aurora, Missouri. A fresh start, new doctors, new community, new opportunities to perfect their story. And perfect it they did. The local news loved them. Brave little girl battles multiple illnesses. Community comes together for special needs family. The Make-A-Wish Foundation granted Gypsy's wishes. The Muscular Dystrophy Association provided support. But here's what's chilling. Dee Dee medically tortured her daughter for years by convincing Gypsy and her doctors that the girl had a variety of severe illnesses, including leukemia, muscular dystrophy, and epilepsy. Gypsy underwent a series of invasive, painful procedures, all of which turned out to be unnecessary. Think about that. Invasive procedures, painful surgeries, all unnecessary, all inflicted by the one person who claimed to love Gypsy most. What Dee Dee was doing has a name: Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Patients who have Munchausen syndrome by proxy, like Dee Dee Blanchard, fabricate medical conditions in someone they're caring for, be it a child, spouse, or elderly parent. But why? What drives a mother to torture her own child? Attention, sympathy, control, and in the Blanchards' case, money. Lots of it. The community didn't just offer emotional support. They offered financial support, free housing, free trips, free medical care. Dee Dee had found the perfect scheme, and Gypsy was her perfect victim. But victims, especially smart ones, don't stay victims forever. Now, here's where this story takes its first major turn. What happens when you keep someone isolated for years, but you give them access to the one thing that connects the entire world? The internet. Dee Dee made one crucial mistake. She gave Gypsy access to the internet. Maybe she thought she could monitor it. Maybe she thought Gypsy was too mentally disabled to use it effectively. She was wrong on both counts. Gypsy discovered online dating sites, chat rooms, a world where she could be someone else, someone who wasn't sick, someone who wasn't dying, someone who could walk. And that's where she met Nicholas Gojon. Nicholas was 23. He lived in Wisconsin. He had his own struggles, autism spectrum disorder, a history of mental health issues. But to Gypsy, he represented something she'd never had: freedom. Their relationship developed online. Hours of chatting, video calls when Dee wasn't around. And slowly, Gypsy began to reveal the truth about her life. But here's the question that will make you uncomfortable. Was Gypsy the manipulator, or was she still being manipulated? Think about it. A young woman who's been controlled her entire life suddenly has access to a man who might do anything for her. A man who's vulnerable in his own way. A man who might be willing to commit the ultimate act of love or desperation. Text messages between Gypsy and Nicholas appear on screen. Their conversations turn dark. Escape plans became elimination plans. But who was driving this train? The girl who'd been a victim her entire life? Or the young man who thought he was saving her? The answer might surprise you. Because on June 14th, 2015, their online fantasy became a deadly reality. Nicholas drives from Wisconsin to Missouri. He's carrying a knife. The plan is simple. Wait until Dee falls asleep, then end this nightmare once and for all. But here's what's haunting. Where was Gypsy during all this? She was hiding in the bathroom. Hiding while her boyfriend murdered her mother. The mother who'd tortured her. The mother who'd stolen her childhood. The mother who'd created a prison of fake illnesses and real control. Blanchard pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in 2016 after confessing that she convinced her boyfriend to stab her mother Dee Blanchard to death as she slept. But here's the detail that changes everything. Gypsy didn't wield the knife. She didn't even watch. She convinced someone else to do it for her. Does that make her more guilty? Or less? After the murder, they took Dee's car and drove to Wisconsin, to Nicholas's house. And that's where Gypsy did something that shocked everyone. She posted that Facebook message. That B*TCH is dead. Why would she do that? If you've just escaped from years of abuse, if you've just been freed from a prison of medical torture, why would you immediately alert the world to what happened? Maybe because for the first time in her life, Gypsy Rose Blanchard was in control of her own story. Dee Blanchard was the victim of a brutal stabbing. But as prosecutors noted, Gypsy Rose was also a victim of a lifetime of medical child abuse. 2 victims, 1 crime. How do you sort out justice in a case like this? The prosecutors had to grapple with something unprecedented. A murder victim who was also an abuser. A perpetrator who was also a victim. A crime that was both calculated and desperate. But here's what makes this case even more complex: the psychology of long-term abuse. When you're controlled from birth, when reality itself is manufactured for you, when pain and love become indistinguishable, what happens to your moral compass? What happens to your ability to see alternatives? In 2016, Gypsy was sentenced to 10 years in prison after she pleaded guilty to murder for her role in the killing of her mother, while Gojon was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. 10 years versus life. The courts recognized something crucial. Gypsy's culpability was different, diminished, but not erased. But here's the question that haunts everyone who studies this case. Could Gypsy have found another way? Could she have called police? Child Protective Services? Could she have simply left? And if you think the answer is obvious, you've never been systematically broken down and rebuilt in someone else's image. Here's the final twist in this story. The one that might change how you see everything. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is a free woman following her early release from prison on December 28, 2023. She served 7 years of her 10-year sentence. And when she was released, the world was watching. Social media was buzzing. Documentary crews were waiting. But here's what's remarkable. In prison, Gypsy learned to read properly for the first time. She got her GED. She got married. She started planning for a future that was entirely her own. The girl who couldn't walk can now run. The girl who couldn't read is now writing her own story. The girl who couldn't make decisions is now making choices about her own life. So I'll ask you again, Was she a murderer or her mother's final victim? Because in the end, the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case isn't just about one family's dysfunction. It's about the thin line between love and control, between protection and imprisonment, between victim and perpetrator. It's about how trauma doesn't just end when the abuse stops. It echoes, it influences, it changes the shape of justice itself. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is free now, free to make her own choices, her own mistakes, her own life, whether that's justice or mercy. Well, that's something you'll have to decide for yourself. But here's what we know for certain. Sometimes the most important question isn't who's guilty, it's who's truly free.